Good evening. I'm going to go ahead and call the Planning Commission meeting to order. I'm Joan Reif, the acting chair tonight, and the first item on our agenda is the roll call.
Motika.
President.
Dye.
Yes.
Reif.
Yes.
Calverley.
Yes.
All right, thank you. The next item on the agenda is the consideration of the minutes from the previous meeting on August 25th. Those have been distributed. Does anyone have any questions, concerns, or comments? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
I'll move to approve the agenda, or the minutes from the previous meeting.
Okay.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? If not, if you could call the roll, please.
Sure. Calverley.
Yes.
Dye.
Yes.
Motika.
Yes.
Reif.
Yes, and the motion passes. All right, moving on to new business. Tonight we have a discussion of the Soul Smart Baseline Assessment and Zoning Review. Is there anything from the administration on this?
No, we had the materials. I originally thought there was going to be a presentation, but I think it was just going to be a general discussion among the panels and anybody in the audience that had any input on.
Yeah, we're calling.
Is it somebody from Soul Smart going to get on the phone? Okay.
Hi, Zach. This is Dan with the Municipal Planning Commission's meeting. We were just reaching out to you for discussion.
Great, thank you.
So maybe we need some little background information. Would the commission think that would be helpful?
Right, just have them describe who they are and what services they provide. And
Zach, did you hear that?
I did so, just asking for background on the program.
Yes, and also if you can just let us know who you are and some of your background.
Great, yep. I'm Zach Wyman. I work for the Cadmus Group. We're a consultant firm, and we are one of the technical assistance providers hired through the Soul Smart program. So there's a number of technical assistance providers, including ICMA, our prime contractor, WRI, NLC, IREC, NREL. So we all work in different regions, focus on different things, but Cadmus has done a lot of the technical assistance in Ohio, and I've been supporting the program since 2019 as a technical assistance provider, and also been your community's assigned technical assistance provider for a couple years now. That's my background with Cadmus. As a consultant, we do a variety of Soul Smart's just one of our contracts. We do climate action planning, solar procurements, that sort of thing, and that's what we specialize in the Soul Smart program as well, in addition to just helping folks navigate through the program. And Soul Smart, a little background on the Soul Smart program, it's been around since 2016. It's a Department of Energy funded program. And the goal of the program is to provide technical assistance to interested communities. And it's not a grant. It doesn't provide funding for projects or specific activities. It's just free technical assistance paid for by the Department of Energy. And our main focus is to help folks navigate through the program, and all the criteria and steps that the program has set up are focused on reducing solar soft costs. So nothing to do with the equipment costs, anything like that. It's really the permitting and inspection, planning and zoning, and the factors that are within the community's control and can significantly impact the overall cost of a project. So helping folks come up with clear permitting inspection processes, helping people update their zoning codes to better account for solar PV entering their community in higher volumes, and all of the steps as you navigate through the program and all the criteria tackle a different part of the solar soft cost issue. I'll stop there, but happy to answer any follow-ups on that.
Thank you.
Do you want Allison to speak about So she wanted to do like an introduction about basically why we're here.
Yeah, please, then we can hear you better. Could you give us your name and a little bit of a background about what you'd like to tell us tonight?
Sure. My name is Allison Fiskus. I'm here as the chair of the Design Review Board. We brought this back to the Planning Commission, the overarching idea of solar panels and the report from SolSmart, because this discussion came before us earlier this year. There was a property in the historic district that wanted to add solar panels. I believe the plans were submitted around January. They did not get to us until about April, and a lot of that came down to the fact that there are no established guidelines, regulations, etc., for how these panels are handled within the historic district. And in my time on the Design Review Board, which I believe dates back to about 2018, this has come up a handful of times, and every time it is very much a, well, in this past time we did this, or as long as you can't see them from the street, we say they're okay. Very loose rules that are not written down anywhere, that are not transparent to the individual who is trying to install these, within that historic district. This led us down quite the rabbit hole of how other like districts handle this, and this is just one of the many aspects of how we do, because the Design Review Board is now effectively an appeals board, but, how we handle these unique requests that come in that may be denied, or, what rules and regulations are put in place, what standards exist for our historic district, because within how it's currently written, there are none. If you look at the Old West End, if you look at historic Perrysburg, they go by the Secretary of Interior standards, which does contain things for solar panels and other like elements that you would want to maintain a historic district. But there are further rules that go into that as well, which is they typically only apply to actual historic properties. I could be wrong about this, should have reviewed, but I don't believe that the house that was seeking solar panels earlier this year is what we would consider to be a true historic property. And so there was much discussion amongst the Design Review Board, and at the end of that meeting, what we motioned to do was to investigate further what proposed changes to our rules would be, so that we could officially enshrine that in some sort of way that provided transparency needed for people who own homes in this district. At the time, the Environmental Planning Commission had already met with SolSmart to discover what they could offer us as a city. And then that was brought to our attention with the mayor's permission. We consulted with SolSmart as well. And through this report that they have provided us, what it really came down to was us realizing that we can't make any decisions or recommendations until planning makes some decisions and recommendations, because there are none for the city of Maumee. So what you have before you is that baseline report that they've gone through everything we have and said, this is what you don't have, this is what you recommend, and we would like to use that as the basis for what recommendations we can then take and put forth for design review. Do you have any questions?
Zach, while you're still on the line, I just want to make sure, are you able to hear everything that's going on right now?
I can hear bits and pieces. I think I had the gist.
Okay.
I've also spoken with Zach, so he has gotten this same background from me as well, so he's fairly up to date on what our concerns and needs were. Any questions for me before I back away slowly?
I mean, do you have recommendations for us, or are you just basically asking us to take up the subject in more detail?
We wanted to meet to discuss as a group, because I do think there's a spectrum of opinions across the board, but we didn't feel that we could even do that, because it would be like making recommendations without, like, we're building a nothing. So, I can tell you that there are pretty much the gamut of opinions for where we all stand on Design Review Board as to whether or not they should be allowed and to what degree they should be allowed. I can say that we ultimately approved the individual who came before us in April with very minor alterations to his plan. We said he could not put the panels on the front porch roof because they were highly visible. But other than that, we set it through, and then we did have extensive discussion at the time about how, there was talk of, is this setting a precedent? Is this, what is this doing? And the truth is that it's doing nothing, because every decision about solar panels that has come before Design Review Board has been made on different merits and looked different and was, it provided a different answer. So what we're trying to do is avoid essentially that confusion in the future and that delay that occurred by the person who was requesting, because it was a considerable amount of time that it got held up in our systems.
So reviewing the report, the zoning code, and to me it seems like solar panels are becoming more widely available, cheaper for people to implement, but our zoning code's largely silent on any sort of regulation on any. I mean, we're not talking about a solar farm, but we're just talking about the people that want to put them in their backyard or putting on their roof. So we should look at this and implement it in some way into the zoning code so that when it comes before Design Review Board, they have something to base their decisions on, as opposed to just saying, well, make them less visible-ish.
Right.
So,
I think it's multifaceted. One, we do have a zoning group or individual that's coming on board just part-time to fill in until we find a zoning person. I did reach out to him. It's, about coming tonight if he could, but he wasn't available. But he's written, I think he said 8 to 10 solar panel zoning codes, for different municipalities. So that would be a starting point. I think tonight's more of like input as to, do people want them? Where would they want them? Kind of some public input on that. I think, ultimately, there's other issues that have to be looked at, as to obviously location of the panels. If they're on the roofs, do we need to have some kind of roof inspection as to stability before they put them on, kind of thing? Or, who's responsible for that, as part of it? So it's kind of a combination of zoning and building code type regulations that we might have to look at and do in combination to make sure that, and even fire regulations, the fire department, if it's up on a roof panel, they have to penetrate the roofs on occasion to vent fires and to make sure they're on board as to how they're installed. And, typically, I think, I don't know, Dan, if you're familiar with them at all, but the electrical part of it, generally they have some kind of shut-off, for if there is a fire that, the fire department's not going to get electrocuted by it by going up on a structure.
I mean, currently, and I'm just thinking, like, my parents live out in the country and have, like, a geothermal. Like, if someone, I guess, were on the outskirts of Maumee and had a pond and wanted to install, like, a geothermal unit, are there building regulations, zoning regulations that would apply in that situation, or?
And in the rural communities, it just depends on where you're at. Sometimes there's no regulations, and, but most of that's underground,
Is this something then that we can task this new person to say, hey, we have this report provided to us by this nonprofit, can you look into it and see how it would apply to our zoning code and make any recommendations?
With input from this board and anybody else here that they can, you can watch the tape from tonight, obviously, and, try to draft something that meets what Maumee's looking for relative to solar panels.
So that's my question. What is Maumee looking for? Because I read through all these best practices and they all make really good sense to me. Like, I would be happy to include pretty much everything that's in here and what Maumee puts into the zoning code. I mean, I have a pretty good understanding of zoning codes and I think that, like, this all makes very good sense to me. So my question is, how does this work? So if we put in, this is what we want in the zoning code for solar, then who decides for, like, the historic overlay district what the regulations are? Is that Design Review Board? Is that Planning Commission? Is that the zoning administrator? How does that decision get made?
All as part of the solar panel, guidelines, zoning code, we can make it specific to deal with, properties that aren't in the historic district, and then properties that are in the historic district that they're going to have to go through the design review board, and maybe there's additional requirements if they're in a historic district or in a historic building.
Because I like what Allison said, there's a difference between being in the historic district and actually having a historic home. And a lot of the homes in the historic district are not, like my house was built in 25, but it's not what I would say anything, it's not a special historic home.
So, and to add to that, that was really the crux of the discussion and disagreement amongst design review, not because we truly had no idea, what to be considering. We have an environmental commission now. Clearly, as a city, we have said we are going to pay closer attention to this and prioritize being a place that, embraces these types of policies, but we have nothing to go off of. One of the things that has commonly been said in my time on design review, and by my understanding, Dan, I think I took your place, so you may also have additional context with this. The general rule was always, if you can't see it from the street, which essentially excludes half of every street because of where the sun is positioned.
That excludes my house.
Exactly.
And I put a metal roof on so I could put solar on.
So what the old standards have been do not align with what the seeming priorities of the citizens that, and the city. We just did not know where to go from there. And so we had to make this one judgment call that frankly flew in the face of what has been done in the past. And by general agreement for the good, but we don't want to, it feels like a dangerous thing to put this, can you do it, can you not do it, in the hands of a group of folks who are just making decisions, essentially based on thoughts and feelings in that particular moment. Some guidance would be very, very helpful.
May I ask, I know it's only your opinion, but what did design review board, what is the majority vote? Are they for it, against it? Is the majority for not seeing them, or?
I am not certain. I can say that, so Catherine, I think, is in the audience today. She did some due diligence walking around, just talking to people. I know she also posted on Facebook and was asking, what do you think about this? And generally, what I saw of that post was pretty much 50-50 split, which is kind of amazing in the current, tenor of conversations that we're seeing online. A lot of folks said, I don't care, let these people do what they want to do. Others had a more, faithful thought about what a historic district should be. Again, I personally would like to see us lean into this, but I am one of five. Maybe it is a conversation that could happen between both groups. I don't know if that makes sense. But we have no answers. And it doesn't seem like, and this is just the tip of the iceberg, to be abundantly clear with everyone. We also don't have any written standards for most of the other things that are, that would come before design review board. Or if we do, they have been very unevenly applied across the historic district. And it really much came down to who was working at that time, who wasn't working at that time, who was our administrator at that time, who wasn't. And that is just very frustrating to our citizens because they want to be able to move forward with some sort of home project without being worried that they're going to request the wrong thing at the wrong time and then have something gummed up in our system for 4 months.
One of the things I feel like the city has tried to move towards is taking fewer things or requiring fewer things to go to both Planning Commission and Design Review Board, just because it allows both businesses and homeowners to move quicker and not have to wait for feedback because there are these set standards. And that's kind of what they were saying within these guidelines is that a lot of it should be, and this is not necessarily within the historic district, but just in general, that it should be allowed by right, which basically means it's always allowed as long as you follow these guidelines. So I think that for moving forward, I mean, I would like to see that in Maumee.
And I think there's general agreement within Design Review Board as well, that would be something that's welcome. It is, again, it's just so complicated because the way that those standards are applied in like districts in our area it's far more contained. And we actually have not begun that research yet. This was step one. We have not yet reached out to any of the entities that oversee that work, but I do know that Old West End and Perrysburg have, Secretary of the Interior standards for historic homes written within how they handle this in their areas. Which anecdotally, when I was still over at Maumee Library, we were doing some things that were minimally like invasive to what our exterior looked like. We installed a story walk. We had some garden beds. That's where the standard was at the time we were doing this. And I had to take that back to our facilities director. And he looked at me like I had 4 head. He's like, well, where are your standards? I was like, there are none. And he could not fathom that. So I do think we are in the minority of places that have this sort of nebulous rules that we have to follow, but we don't have them written down in any way that a citizen could find or follow.
If there aren't any further questions, thank you.
Yeah, thank
Appreciate
you.
your comments. Does anyone else in the audience wish to speak on this topic? Yes, ma'am. Hi, could you please state your name?
Sure. I'm Margot Puffenberger, and I'm co-chair of the Environmental Tree Advisory Committee. So we had the initial meeting with SoulSmart, and they did a presentation for our group. I think, Allison, were you there? So we had a presentation then, and, in conversations with Design Review over the residents that was asking for panels. Essentially, these guys put this report to be, like, Alan was saying how this person coming in has done however many reports. I mean, you can ask Zach how many their group has done. I mean, they do it for municipalities everywhere. So they help develop this report based on what municipalities are doing in other places to put solar into their code. And we've had a lot of conversations as of late about how, our code in general needs a total revamp. And like Allison was just talking about, there's a lot of things missing in it. And this is definitely one of them. So this report here is giving you kind of like the basis of what people would normally be putting into their code. So like my kind of thoughts were when we went to this step to get it to Planning Commission, because like what Allison said, it's Planning Commission is who needs to pass it for the city as a whole. Then Design Review or whomever can make their tweaks on, the historic district. But this plan should give you a good baseline and suggestions for you guys to be able to consider and look over. Now, whether this person coming in wants to give suggestions on some experience they've had, but it's still not someone super familiar with Maumee giving Maumee's input, I guess, in kind of my opinion. It's not our new planning person taking control of Maumee stuff. It's a temporary person, filling it until we get a new urban planner hired. So I guess I'm kind of wondering now, it's like, I don't know what you guys normally do with this sort of thing. If this basis is enough for you guys to kind of take a look at, have a conversations about, and make decisions on whether it would go into the code or not. Because I've never been a part of a kind of a code getting overhauled or a new item getting put in. But I definitely feel like the answer shouldn't be, whether we want to allow solar or not in Maumee. It's something that should be allowed if people want it, but I feel like should be more about parameters on how it needs to happen. But like as Allison was saying too, it's to to discount a whole, like half of the population in Maumee, because panels might be visible on their roof from the road seems, kind of unreasonable. Just because I don't know if everyone is looking for a house and thinking about, oh, I want solar. Am I on the right side of the street? And even I was just looking over the plans for the residents that just got theirs kind of confirmed this past spring. And I mean, with their house, they seem to have them on kind of all sides of the roof, which is kind of different from, we have panels on my house. We're on the west side of Kona over by St. Joe's, but all our panels are on the south side. It just so happens, and we're high enough that you can't see them. So it's just interesting. Some people would kind of have no issue at all just because they kind of got lucky. Yeah, I don't know.
Does anyone have
But
any
then,
questions?
I guess, I'm sorry, one more thing. So when Alan was talking about having, building come in, electrical, all that stuff happens with the group that installs the panels. Like when we got our panels installed, I mean, I think they went through all getting the permits for us, but they made sure that the joists were, or roof of whatever you're called, the joists were strong enough to hold the panels according to what the weight were. And I think we had to end up like sistering to give it more support so that they could hold the panels. But then, we also had the electrical inspector come and inspect that. And it does have a big shut-off valve at where it comes into the house, so if anything does happen, it's very easily shut off. I don't remember fire being involved, but that might have just been, behind the scenes that I just wasn't aware of. Thanks.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything that they'd like to add? Yes.
Philip Leinbach, I've never really thought about this issue, but Adam is right. The solar panels are just ubiquitous. They're here to stay. I don't think I would put one on my house, but that's just me, right? I think, to Jamie's point about people wanting to move faster, clear standards will help that happen, without a doubt. A lot of these changes probably should be adopted. The report that you mentioned, I think would be great if that were made publicly available in some format, because I suspect there needs to be more public discussion about it before we would adopt, some specific zoning changes. But if there were, if that report were the basis for some, and the planning commission said, hey, in working with the administration, here's kind of a draft, what we're thinking about, but maybe with the Soul Smart information out earlier, more people who might be interested could come prepared to share maybe why they don't want to see one on somebody's house that's next door, I don't know. But people have to have some good reasons for things. That would be an informed group would be able to provide better input for this group and others to make a final decision. So, yes, I'm all for design guidelines and not objectively, subjective determinations about what's good and what's not.
Yeah. Thank you. Anyone else like to add anything?
I just say, I just really appreciated this report and the fact that it says things that should be included, things that you should make sure, you should watch out to not have included, that you wouldn't realize are barriers to having solar. So I really appreciate this, and I hope that we can move forward along these lines, because I think it was, obviously they know what they're doing. It was really well thought out.
I'd like to say there was a comment made about, Margo, you had made a comment about needing to go over the zoning code. I mean, essentially, we have been doing that for a while now. I think while this is on the table, there's a couple of other things that we might want to consider if we're going to take the time into going back through rewriting the zoning code or making new rules and regulations for this, would be water retention and wind as well. I think those two things will also come up down the road as we're diving into this.
I think that's a good point, too. I'm not sure where you want us to take it this evening. I mean, I think we might need help, obviously, from the law department.
No help here, no.
Please?
We'll draft something, like I said, a zoning code that involves, the solar zoning code, if you want to call it that, and try to include like some standards for the historic district. And then, like I said, you could have, at the next meeting, hopefully we would have something available. And then you can have further discussion on it, tweak it from there, and then it would go to council, the usual process.
Yeah, if we could do that to start getting some proposed language or identifications of here's where we need to insert that into the zoning code, whether it's just adding additional definitions or a new section.
Right,
And if some of it, like for design review board, if it doesn't necessarily have to be like code changes, but more like policies and procedures for, hey, here's what they should rely on in reviewing, but I know that would be
I think
appreciated.
the eye on alternative, energy sources is probably a good idea too. I think we're a little behind on solar, but maybe we could get ahead of some of these others that are coming too. I don't know what we'd want to call it, but maybe not just solar.
Yeah, I'll have them take a look at wind, and you said, what's the other one?
Water retention.
Water retention. Okay.
Just clarification. Just clarification, the items for design review will come to us, or will they go to planning first? Because I do know that there was a request to have discussion within that group too, and I want to be mindful and respectful of that.
I mean, we could have a meeting and you can look through the proposed standards that we're going to propose, as part of the zoning code, because I think it would have to all be set forth first in the zoning code.
Okay.
So we can get your input too.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone else want to add anything on this? You want to speak, sir?
Bill Cox. I just wondered, in the future, if there's federal and state money available for grants for the historic district, if they make sure we consider that if we put panels on some of the buildings down there, would that affect their ability to get grants in the future, but modifications to the buildings through the historic area? 'Cause I know they're real testy about some of that stuff when you're working on it. And I would like to also add that somewhere down the line, I don't know how the inspections work for these solar panels, but I would suggest that we come up with some good standards for inspections of the installations of them. I've looked at some of the installations and some of them are less than stellar, so.
Those are all things to consider. Thank you.
Gonna step aside next time. To Bill's point, the Secretary of the Interior's standards should provide the rules that would make it compliant with any federal grant or state grant that would be able to be applied for. Again, Old West End, Perrysburg have those words in their code but again, those are often for things that are truly considered historic properties and not entire historic districts as we have, deemed within MAMI.
Zach, this might be your opportunity to chime in here, but I'm assuming that any product that's installed is going to have very specific installation instructions that the inspectors would be held to hold the installing contractor accountable for. Is that correct?
Yeah, we often see that detailed in another part of the the permitting checklist, which details all the requirements for the installer to fill out, and it goes step by step for accessories. Some communities opt to include residential, commercial, and ground mounted all in one checklist, but it goes over the state building and electrical regulations and what requirements the town holds installers to, and then details exactly what's required with their submission. So if you do opt to adopt new codes and waive the need to go to the design review board for a standard residential PV system, just if that's what the community opts to add in, that permitting checklist is a kind of a side-by-side tool. These are the two things that every single, I think we're almost at 600 Soul Smart communities now. Every single one has done these two actions. That permitting checklist will outline exactly what the current process is. So if you do just require a building permit or a building and electrical permit or a new solar permit's created for this particular project type, we can work with the community to help outline the exact standards that the installer is held to, all the additional supplemental information that they are responsible for submitting alongside with their building permit, or whatever permit's required, and then the inspection requirements. So the idea there is you're allowing the standard residential accessory project to go forward by right, but you have an opportunity through that checklist to detail exactly what the installer is required to submit with that permit. So it's not just like any project can get installed with no oversight. And the idea is you get more complete information. The installer coming in knows exactly what's required of them, what standard they'll be held to, and hopefully saving the installer money, in turn saving the resident installing their system money, and then also saving the community a lot of time back and forth with incomplete documentation, or we need to know X, Y, and Z about your project you didn't submit. It's supposed to streamline that whole process, and that's what when I say soft cost, what we're talking about, that back and forth, the incomplete information, having a system installed that isn't up to the community standards because the developer maybe did it intentionally or often just didn't know what the community had decided was their standard, and the board reviewing changes over time and it's not consistently applied, the standard aren't consistently applied year to year, project to project. So that's what the zoning review and that checklist are supposed to kind of work in tandem, letting you know here's the things you should be thinking about, and then here's where you document that process. So every time a new developer, a new resident is interested in solar in your community, they know exactly what is allowed and exactly what they're expected to, the standard they're expected to meet.
May I ask, what is the average life expectancy of a solar panel on, let's say, a roof?
It's usually 20 years. The warranties differ from product to product. But yeah, usually if you're going to need a roof replacement within 10 years, we would advise to get the roof replacement along with your solar panels, so you're not 7 years into your 20 to 25 year project lifetime, you need to do a roof replacement. So 20 to 25 years is our standard assumption when we're doing a PV project.
Does installing any of these, I guess, standard types of solar panels to roofs, does that automatically void any of the warranties that you may have gotten with the installation of the roof, if we're just talking about like a shingled roof? If you know.
With a shingled roof warranty?
Yeah, you get a new roof with shingles on, and they warrant it for whatever, 25 years with the Owens Corning whatever shingle. Does installing solar panels on top of that roof, does that generally void that warranty?
I don't believe so. I can look at where that question comes up a lot more with big commercial installations that we work with, and there's usually a standard, and then that PV developer will take on that workmanship warranty. So the panel's insured by the manufacturer, and then the developer will have a separate warranty for their work. But I can double check because I definitely have more commercial on my mind at the moment and want to make sure, and that's more with like the PVC membrane roofs, and those are warranted much longer than a residential roof oftentimes. So I can double check on the PV warranty question for residential projects.
Adam, in my experience, the roofing contractor, typically, in order to meet the requirements of their warranty for the roof, they will be the ones that will want to do any penetrations, any sealing to the roof. So I would assume that if you have a new roof installed, you'll be working hand in hand with your roofing contractor in order to get your warranty honored for the roof, for whatever supporting or stands need to be installed for the mounting of the solar panels.
Sorry, did you have a comment?
Oh, I was just going to say, it depends on the shingle manufacturer. Oak Globe and Mangrove and OCF all have different standards for people walking on the roof while they're doing the installations, and now that affects their warranty.
Right.
Well, and this brings up a good question again for you, Zach, is most roofing contractors will come out and they will do an assessment on the roof in order to determine whether or not the installers did it properly and the roof will be warranted. Are there any, have you seen any regulations or is there anything like that in the solar installation world where in order for the manufacturer to stand behind their product, there's a inspection to make sure it was installed properly?
I have not seen that inspection worked into the process. There's often electrical and building inspection from the town, but I haven't seen any requirement or like a requirement for the roofer to have an opportunity to go inspect the work of the PV developer.
Thank you.
But that's another question I can look into.
Isaiah Gonzalez. So basically when a solar panel company or any like a dish they penetrate the roof, that penetration is their responsibility and it wouldn't void the entire, the shingles and everything is still warranted everywhere else. But if there's a leak happened on that penetration, it falls on the installation of that solar panel or the dish or whatever is being installed on the roof. So it would never void the entire roof. If it leaked on the other side of the house, which the shingles failed, that's the warranty on the roof. So that's how that dignifies those two entities.
So the consumer needs to, pick a reputable company
Yes.
that knows what they're doing, just like anything else.
I was wondering so when the city puts together this draft of the zoning, this new zoning section, can you send it to them before you send it to us and they can review it and see if there are any things that they would call out as not being recommended wording or before it goes to us? So that
Sure. It's not a problem if I have the contact information. I don't know that I do at this point, but if somebody provides it to me, I can forward it.
Cool.
Is that it for, what's his name on the phone? Zach. Is that something you guys would generally provide as well as we come up with proposed zoning language and you could chime in on that?
Yes, absolutely. And our communities have taken the zoning review in a number of different directions. Some layer it into their entire code. Others have just adopted a new 3 to 5 page solar ordinance and copy a lot of the suggested language. I'm not sure if everyone has seen the zoning review, but they copy the suggested language and use that as a baseline to just start their draft and then iterate based on that. One caveat, we are happy to do that. We've done that a lot in the past. Just take advantage of the Soul Smart program while it's here. There's a lot of Department of Energy program changes and things getting canceled or paused unexpectedly. So I would love to help the community, and we review those drafts all the time, definitely within our scope of work, as long as the program is still up and running. So I would say
sooner rather than later.
If you have some interim questions, we don't need to see a final draft. If you just want us to look at one section or one section at a time as it's ready, we're happy to do that. We don't need to, there's no formal process or we'll only look at a 50%, 80% draft or something. Just send along questions to me whenever they come up and we'll try to get back to you as quick as possible.
My only ask, Alan, would most likely be that as this verbiage is being created, that there's something, to the effect of deteriorating solar panels and how that should be handled similar to roofing. I think that'll be
Right.
easy to do.
Yeah, because if they're dead, so to speak, do they have a removal requirement, after their useful life if they're not going to replace them? I guess that's the part. How do you handle that? And if they don't, does it become a nuisance then, or who's responsible to remove them and pay the cost of that? So,
I don't know if that was a question for me, but if you guys are particularly interested in the decommissioning requirements, we have contract language about who's responsible for what, and I'm sure I can pull some examples from other codes as well. It's not in the zoning review because it's a little bit more in the
helpful, so if you could provide that too, so.
Well, that's the issue. Yeah, that's the issue I think that we're gonna run into, is the overlap of it. What happens if we have solar panels that should be decommissioned, that's an eyesore to the neighbors? How does Maumee enforce that nuisance? You know, or we can't.
Or is it a nuisance? Yeah,
But I mean, if they're on the same timeline, if you have to replace your roof, you're gonna have to take them off.
Exactly. Gotta go.
But people don't always replace their roofs.
That's true.
right. You see roofs caving in occasionally that are not being addressed.
Well, I think this has been very helpful. I don't know if anyone has anything else to say about it, but it sounds like the law department has its work cut out for it, but I think this would be a good thing for the city to get some clarification on this, so. Zach, we appreciate your comments tonight. Thank you so much. Does anyone else have anything else to say about this? I don't think we're going to take any action tonight. We'll see what language we can come up with, and then we can all consider it again.
Okay.
So thank you. We have one more thing on the agenda. This is consideration of ordinance 034-2025, which is an ordinance amending section 114303 of the code concerning exempt signage.
Thank you, Zach.
And I do have a revised version for everybody to consider. Pass those down. There were some changes made relatively recently. You can see on the second page that are in red.
Right. Well, this originally came up, it was just going to be limited. The Little League approached the city about being able to put up basically during the season, you know, to help cover some of their expenses, to be able to put advertisement on the outfield fences, on some of the other fences along the ball field. And as we looked at it, and Adam suggested maybe any of the ball fields that have permanent fencing, that it would be an option, you know, as to the ability for those organizations to raise funds through that advertisement through the season. And so that's kind of how it's morphed into the provisions here. And then the other addition that we thought of actually was, you know, banners on city-owned light poles. Generally, the city puts up the banners, but like, I think they're going to put up veterans banners, you know, more recently. So if there's other programs like that, that there's no questions those can go up to without having to get permits for each one. So that's why we added in a G section also to this.
Yeah, and if we're going to do it, I mean, I was just thinking, because I walk by Fairfield Park all the time, and there's always baseball games going on there, and I grew up helping my dad hang signs all over the fences. I mean, it's an easy way to generate revenue for the local Little League teams, or, you know, the management. So I just thought, let's do it all on all city fences. If someone's hosting a pickleball tournament and they want to, you know, sponsored by Fifth Third, you know, whatever it might be, you know, we dress it all at once.
Right, yeah, if they can generate some money, and it, you know, comes down generally when the season's over, so they're not up the whole time and flying around the city kind of thing, but, you know, is the goal of this. But just so that they don't separately need to get a permit for each one, and that they would be exempt from those regulations then. Then anybody else obviously still is required to get a sign permit and go through that process.
Does anyone in the audience wish to speak on this particular proposed ordinance?
I guess this would be open the public hearing, right?
Ms. Puffer, did you wish to?
I was just gonna say, I know soccer is interested in it as well, but I assume that's addressed as well.
Is there fencing there is the only question.
Yes, the white, vinyl fencing.
Okay, so that would be included then. And they just have to, the city would have to approve how it's attached, so it doesn't, you know, damage the fencing. And some fencing is pretty easy to attach to, others not so easy.
This is a public hearing, so if anyone else has anything to say about it, we'd entertain that. Does the administration have anything else it wishes to add?
Nothing further.
Is there any discussion, concern, anything that we should address? Well, given the hour, then I'll go ahead and make a motion to keep things moving. I move that ordinance 034-2025 2025, an ordinance amending Section 114303 of the Maumee Codified Ordinances concerning exempt signs. Move that be approved.
I'll second that motion.
Any further discussion before we call the roll? Would you call the roll, please?
Calverley,
Yes.
Dye,
Yes.
Matika,
Yes.
Rife.
Yes. So that passes. Does anything else need to come before the commission this evening? If not, we appreciate your participation tonight, and if we have a motion to adjourn,
I will move to adjourn this hearing.
I'll second.